Hi everyone and welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I apologize that we are near the window, so you might hear like cars or something in the background. I would rather have filmed in a normal spot, but right now I can't, so I do apologize if that bothers you. But in today's video, we're going to be talking about poop. Yes, we're going to be talking about poop. And I'm going to be saying the word poop many times in this video, so it'll be a good time. But we're going to be talking about leopard gecko poop specifically. We're going to be talking about what their poop should look like, what indicators of illness you can find in their poop. We're going to be talking about how often they should poop. It's going to be lovely. Let's do it. Let's discuss poop. The reason it's important to talk about their poop is because it's a great indicator of how they're doing internally. And so you want to make sure for the health of your reptile that they're having good, healthy poops. What does a leopard gecko poop look like? It is composed of two parts. One is a brown part and one is a white part. The brown part is the actual poop or fecal matter. The white part is urates. If you're thinking about it in comparison to us, we have like liquid urine and then we have like the solid brown poop. And for a leopard gecko, they don't really have a liquid urine, they have urates. It's kind of like for us, how we pee, we get rid of toxins in our blood. But for leopard geckos, it's like a more solid form and that's how they preserve water. So anyways, the white bit, urates, the brown bit, actual poop. The brown bit should always be, like I said, brown. It should be like uniform in shape. It'll be like a little log. I love that I'm talking about poop like this. It'll be a little log, and then the urates should be like right next to it, and will typically be, I don't want to say they're uniform in shape. They should never be like firm, but they also shouldn't be like a liquidy mess. And also should be white or whitish yellow in color. If they're pink or if they're like really yellow or if they're crusty, those are all indications of different things, and we'll talk about that in a bit. But it's very important for you to recognize there are two parts. The brown part, fecal matter, it's a solid uniform shape and it's brown. The white one, it's also kind of white or yellow. Urates, it's not as uniform, but it's also not just like completely liquidy. So let's talk about some of the things that your leopard gecko's poop should not look like. So it shouldn't be very wet. Like if it's, not uniform in shape and there's a lot of liquid that comes with it, it very well could be diarrhea. Alternatively, it shouldn't be like so dry when it's fresh that it crumbles. Like when it's dry, like it's been there for a couple days, it's obviously going to be a bit crumbly. But if it comes out of them and it's like quite dry and like there's no moisture to it at all, that's not a good sign either. You don't want the urates to be yellow or orange. You don't want them to be crusty or hard. You don't want the brown part to actually be green or to be red. You also don't want to see any particles of substrate or any undigested food like insects in their poop. You want their food to be completely digested, and you don't want to see like a whole worm or a part of a worm in the poop. So if the poop is like very dry and crusty, and if there's like no moisture to it at all, it's a sign of dehydration. If the poop is very liquidy, it very well could be diarrhea, or they just ate something that had a lot of moisture. The thing to know about the poops is if they are strange one time, it's not a big deal. If they are strange consistently, then it's a big deal. Now, if it's strange one time, like you notice there's blood in the poop, that is an immediate vet trip. But like if the urates are like a little off in color, like once or twice, and then it goes away, typically not something to be concerned about. If the poops are green, that is indication of diarrhea. And green poop, in my experience, is a bad sign for leopard geckos. And also African fat-tail geckos. Both of my geckos before passing away had green poop. So if your gecko has green poop and you're not keeping it on like green sand, or you didn't give it something that would cause the poop to be green, go to the vet. If your gecko is regularly having poops that are just like not uniform in shape and they're kind of all over the place, sometimes they're diarrhea, sometimes they're not, this could be an indication that your gecko has parasites. Could also be an indication that your gecko has some form of like husbandry issue, like the temperature isn't warm enough or it's too hot and it's causing your gecko to have diarrhea, like causing the food to digest too fast. If you find whole insects in the poop, it could be that you're feeding items that are too big. It could be that your temperatures are wrong. It could also just be a one-off thing. If If it happens over and over again, then you'll want to change your husbandry and consult a vet. Finally, if the urates are off in color, like I mentioned, it's not a big deal if it's just once or twice, but if it's consistently happening, from what I've read, when the urates are more yellow, it can be an indication of a vitamin deficiency or like having too much of a vitamin. It can also be dehydration. If it lasts just a couple times, I wouldn't worry about it. If it's consistent, it'll be something that you want to address with your exotics vet. I've also read that if the urates are pink, it can also be caused by vitamin issues. Again, this is something you're going to want to consult your vet for. Pink urates could also be an indication of blood, so just keep that in mind. If you see pink urates, it might not be that serious, but consulting a vet is better than like taking the chance that it's not that harmful and then something actually being like really wrong with your pet. How often should a leopard gecko poop? Well, the more often that your gecko is eating, the more often that they'll poop. If your gecko is a juvenile, or if your gecko is a rescue and you're trying to put weight on them, so you've been feeding them more, anytime that you have an instance in which you're feeding a gecko like more than the normal amount, they're going to be pooping more. That's just how it works. And so juveniles, they'll poop like daily because they're eating so much. Same thing for rescues if you're feeding them more often. But like every day or every other day for geckos that are fed daily is a normal amount to poop. Now for adult geckos, who shouldn't eat more than twice a week, by the way, but adult healthy weight geckos that are eating once or twice a week, and some people feed 3 times a week. If you're only feeding like a really lean food, I guess that's fine, but like just be careful about like obesity. But I feed my leopard geckos once or twice a week, and they typically poop about the same amount of times. They'll poop like twice a week. So if a gecko goes off of food, it will still poop. It'll just be in smaller amounts and it'll be less often. Typically they'll still poop because they're still consuming their shed or they're still drinking water and they have waste to get rid of. If your gecko hasn't pooped in a week, so 7 days or more, I would consult a vet, especially if they're still eating and they haven't been passing anything. One thing you can do while, waiting for your vet appointment is to check your temperatures. If your temperatures are too cold, then your gecko is not going to be digesting food very easily. Your gecko also could be impacted. So leopard gecko impaction can come from not having warm enough enclosure, not having enough moisture, like they're not getting enough water. It can come from eating food that's like has a fibrous exoskeleton, like a mealworm. And that's okay to feed mealworms, by the way. I don't want to scare anyone. You can feed mealworms. Just make sure that you're not offering only mealworms, or if you are, that you, which I don't recommend, but if you are exclusively feeding mealworms, that all of your husbandry is correct otherwise. That way they can pass the exoskeleton easily. Impaction can come from loose substrate, although it's not as much of a risk as people might make it out to be. But impaction can happen from tons of things. You can have them accidentally eat paper towel when they're trying to get their shed off and they choke on the paper towel, or it gets built up in their body. It can happen from sphagnum moss in their humid hide. It can happen from a lot of things. So it's always a good idea to check the underside of your gecko, especially if they're not pooping or if they're not eating. If you see a large green or black mass, it's very possible that this is a site of impaction. Like you can normally see it in the lower abdomen. It could also be an indication of like internal bleeding. So I don't want anyone to just jump to that conclusion. If you notice any sort of like large green or black or blue mass, consult a vet. They'll be able to tell you what it is. I can't see what you're experiencing through the screen right here, so I can't tell you, but both things are possible. Internal bleeding in the beginning, when it hasn't, spread fully, looks similar to like constipation or impaction in a leopard gecko who has like a lot of food to digest still. So just keep that in mind. If the impaction is bad enough, you will actually notice the gecko's stomach bow where the impaction is, which is really awful, but I've seen that. If your gecko is having weird poops, the one thing you're going to want to do is bring a fecal to the vet. So what is a fecal? It is basically a test that the vet or vet tech will perform on the poop to analyze it for parasites and other things. Having a fecal done is like a pretty routine thing. It shouldn't be too expensive, and it is a great way to like gain access or more understanding to what's going on inside your gecko. Like for example, if they find parasites, then you'll be able to treat for parasites. A vet is going to have a lot of experience looking at poop, or a vet tech. They'll have a lot of experience looking at poop, so if there's something that they can see maybe that you can't, they can give you an answer about like what's going on with your gecko. I really recommend taking a fecal in. How do you bring a poop to the vet? So typically the vet will want to see the poop like within 24 hours after it was laid. The sooner the better. And if you like find your gecko's poop and it's like a fresh poop, like you just saw them, you know, lay it on the ground, but you can't make it to the vet for a few hours, pop it into a baggie, put it in the fridge, and then bring it to your vet. The thing to know about fecals is that you don't want any like bits of substrate and such to be attached to it. If you can get your animal to poop on a flat surface, that's very easy for you to scoop up the whole poop and put it in the baggie or like the little container that you put it in and bring it in. It's going to be easier for them to get a very like good reading. So just keep that in mind. If you know your gecko is having issues, you could put them in a quarantine enclosure, and then because it's like, you know, a very simplistic setup, accessing a poop should be very easy to bring that to the vet. And if you know you want to have a fecal done, just check your gecko's enclosure like 3 times a day while you wait for a poop. That way you can snag one when it's nice and fresh and bring it to the vet. One more thing I want to say about leopard gecko poops is that during ovulation season, especially if the gecko has been laying eggs, their poops can look very weird. I've experienced this, I've had friends who've experienced this, and we've sent pictures of leopard gecko poop to each other to see like, hey, like, did you experience this when your gecko laid eggs? And sure enough, yes, we had. So just one thing to keep in mind is if your gecko is laying eggs, the poops may look strange. They just have a different color, they have a different texture, they have a different makeup, like they look different. I'll put a few on the screen, but they're weird looking. Now, if this continually happens, I'd consult a vet. If it only happens a couple times, or if it happens like right after they've laid and then it stops, it's okay. But yeah, there's some weird poops that can come out of egg-laying females for sure. One last thing I want to mention is where leopard geckos poop, and I'm going to use my gecko Amy as an example because she poops in precarious places, but it's usually the same precarious place every time. So here she pooped on her log. I don't know how she managed to do it. She's a genius. And here she pooped on top of the edge of the paper towel against her human hide. Again, she's a genius. But don't be alarmed if your geckos poop in the same place every time or if it's a weird place. But that's all I have to say about leopard gecko poops. I hope you found this informational and insightful. Please let me know, have you had any weird leopard gecko poop experiences down below? Also, please like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, all the good stuff. And with that, I will see you guys in the next one. Bye!